The question, what is the essence of self, and how is it defined? As I suggested earlier, let us approach this question through finding answers to what the self is not. The reason for choosing this method is that the mind already has preconceived answers, which were conceived and internalized early in life, to the question, who am I? What I plan to do is to examine these preconceptions and investigate which ones are invalid. I must emphasize that our goal is not to examine which of these presuppositions is true, but quite the opposite. Trying to approach the question of what the self is not will have absolutely different ramifications from asking what the self is. No one can claim that the mind has no answers to the question, what is the self? The mind creates an image of the self one way or another. Therefore, it makes sense to first examine the validity of this image. Otherwise, the mind loses its genuine ability to question its surroundings. We should first discover how we imagine the self in our mind. As a habit, consciously or unconsciously, the mind does not start from scratch. In any analysis, the mind tends to work based on a series of assumptions. This mechanism creates a blissful ignorance for the mind that commonly prevents any form of creativity and innovation. These presuppositions can be compared to mathematical or geometrical axioms. If these axioms are logically sound, the statements derived from them should be correct. Any conclusion based on false starting points will be invalid. The same goes for the mind and its activities. If we try to solve a problem with a mind filled with false suppositions, we will end up with incorrect, untrue, and invalid conclusions. Therefore, we should examine what our starting point is and determine if our axioms are necessary, sufficient, and self-evident. Minimum number of suppositions. In order to clarify and distinguish our exact starting point, let us first set two ground rules that I consider to be axiomatic. This is a necessary step in establishing any logical statement. First, we assume that it is axiomatic that the physical universe exists. In other words, we take it for granted that we have no doubt about the existence of the universe. The essence of this existence, or how it is viewed or should be viewed, is not yet our concern. The only thing we have accepted so far is that the universe has a physical reality. It has a real existence. It is not non-existent. Our second basic supposition is that real creatures, including human beings, or what are considered to be humans at the moment, exist in this universe. However, despite acknowledging the existence of humans, we have not yet explained or defined what humans are. We have only acknowledged that they exist, and their existence is real. To be more precise, we have not yet clarified if a human being is, or is not, a soul, spirit, body, ego, or self. It should be obvious by now why I have not attempted to define what human beings are. We want to start from scratch. Otherwise, there would be no reason to write this book. So far, we have acknowledged that the universe exists in which creatures called human beings exist and are parts of this universe. But the matter is not as simple as it seems. In fact, a great question arises at this point. How can we perceive this universe and demonstrate it to others? In other words, how can we understand the way in which we perceive the universe? And when we do, how can we present our own perception to others? We have accepted that a universe exists that is perceivable. But here lies an ambiguity about the essence of this perception in our mind and the reality that exists outside of the human mind in the real world. The difference is not partial and quantitative, but general and essential. The universe and the human beings that exist are quite different from the universe, with a lowercase u, and the human beings perceived by the mind. They are different in essence. That is, the mind's perception of the universe is merely a processed image, irrespective of what does or does not exist in the real universe outside the mind. As mentioned earlier, we are not denying the reality of the universe and its creatures, including human beings, but consider their existence axiomatic. The ambiguity relates to what and how the mind pictures the universe. The question is, how authentic is the universe that is built, imagined, or processed in the mind? It is noteworthy that this mind-made world or universe is not an extraordinary and bizarre concept. It is actually the world or universe as we know it. Because the universe that we know is nothing but the universe created by our mind. In fact, each of us has access only to the universe that we have created on our own. It might seem that we are verging on philosophical issues, but that is absolutely not so. The present discussion is not at all philosophical and abstract, but rather practical and matter-of-fact. As we shall see, it gradually covers the most tangible, most experiential, and most physical aspects of daily life. Seeing, the world, the universe, the cosmos. We have used these words countless times in our life. The general assumption is that people comprehend and demonstrate the meaning of them clearly, completely, and without any problem. But let us ask our question once more. Can you show me the world or universe as you perceive it? Can you really? I will try to explain why the answer to this apparently idiotic question is no, but let us first review a few simple facts. Lift your eyes from this page and look around you. Now try to describe with ordinary language the process and procedures of seeing. A simple explanation of the phenomenon might go as follows. The eyelids are opened, light enters the eyes and stimulates a group of visual cells, which causes a series of electrochemical reactions in the nervous system and brain and so on. After entering the eye, light is transformed into something else, whose nature is not important for the purposes of this discussion. It can be an electric pulse or a chemical reaction. Whatever it is no longer the light that was emitted or reflected from the object into the eye. Right? From this point on, we are left in darkness. As soon as the light is transformed into electrochemical reactions, we lose any type of direct relation with what has entered the eyeball. After being created in the eye, that electric pulse moves through the nervous system, reaching the parts of the brain that analyze and process the signals. For the purpose of this discussion, what physiological reactions occur in which parts of the brain do not concern us? Ultimately, after a series of complex procedures, the brain produces an image, a colored, three-dimensional, super high-resolution image. This picture is not the physical object. It is just an image created through the brain's activity. It has not been directly created by the optical superposition of the light waves emitted or reflected by the physical object. It has been imagined by the brain and is essentially different from what exists out there. It does not concern us here that this image is deficient because of some sort of physiological shortcoming in the eyes. For example, one such shortcoming might be the filtering mechanism that makes it impossible for the eye to capture the full light spectrum emitted or reflected by the object. Even if the eye did not operate as an electromagnetic filter, which omits a great deal of data, our questions would still remain. What comes to existence in the mind is produced by the visual system and is essentially different from its external counterpart. These two identities come from two different worlds and exist in two different worlds. One is a material object in the physical world, while the other is a mental entity produced through cerebral activity in the personal mental world. Therefore, when looking at an object, even though we are looking at the same physical entity, what I see is only in my mind, and what you see is only in your mind. What I see is my mental creation, and what you see is your mental creation. Not only are these two images different from each other, but they also differ from their external corresponding object. So we are dealing with three distinct entities.